Okay, so yeah, thank you, Patrick. So next up, we're gonna get to Stephane, who's going to be talking about security frameworks and zero trust. Right? Perfect. Well, go ahead, Stephane.
Do I need to turn this on, or does he turn it on right away? Awesome. Can you hear me? There you go. Thank you. Am I going to get feedback with this, maybe? No? Yeah.
I'm just going to get him to turn off the microphone.
Sure. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good? Awesome. It was a good talk. So thank you, Patrick, for doing this. It's really good information. So I want to talk about, I guess, a bit of the alongside of what he's mentioned regarding the lateral movement and all that. I want to talk about identities, right? And how we manage these as it relates to security, right? So when the hacker is actually going through doing his attacks and getting that persistence and doing that lateral movement, I want to focus on that and how we actually raise awareness for companies that are not looking at this right now, right? So it is a bit of a, I guess, a maturity model, right? You want to protect the organization first. You want to have an EDR solution. You want to have an AV solution in place. And then what, right? So we're going to talk about that this morning. Sorry, I'm going to go over this. So I've been doing this for about 20 years. Prior to CrowdStrike, I did about 8 years at Microsoft and 10 years at VMware. I've been doing endpoint security for a very long time. I know I'm old. I was actually doing security for Windows 95. There was no security in 95, but we still had to do it, right? And even though I'm from Montreal, so I don't have a French to English translator. So if you don't understand me, just come to our booth, and I got somebody that speaks really good English. And I'm a huge basketball fan. So what I want to talk about is the challenges that have been accelerated with the pandemic when we had devices that had to come online for your organization faster than expected. It's not a recent problem, right? I've been talking about BYOD for at least 8 years, right? If not more. When I was at VMware, we were talking about allowing people to bring their own device and connect it to a corporate asset. Or using virtualization and having a desktop that was secure, and their asset would be just a jump point. But that asset is still connected to the network, right? So Frost and Sullivan had some good, interesting feedback where it is saying the number of devices connected to our environment, so our corporate environment, is going up nonstop. All right, so I want to ask you a question. If I would ask you today, how many devices do you have with you that are used for either work or personal that might be used for works, right? So let's do one. Who has only one? You have only one? You're now an exception. So who has two? Two devices. Three? So we're getting more on the average, right? 3, 4 or more? Just go in the water and you'll see. So, so we see that. The number of devices people have to support is just going up, right? Funny enough, when I was talking about BYOD way back when, one device was more than enough for everything, right? And now we're just ease of use. I want an iPad, I want a phone, I want a couple of laptops, a work machine, a home machine. Like these devices are connected. So it's just a bigger footprint for the hackers to actually attack the weaker factor, right? The people that are working from home that need to connect remotely, And you don't have to raise your hand because that's a bit of a tricky question, but have you ever done war driving? It's still a thing today. We still have people doing war driving in neighborhoods and just trying to get stuff. And now they see, okay, well, I can also get to people's Wi-Fi, and oh, by the way, I get access to a CFO laptop because his home Wi-Fi security is crap, right? So it's getting more and more. Like those remote connectivity, those remote machines that need to be corporately connected needs to be secured, right? So if you have a good AV solution in place, if you have an EDR solution in place, that's fine. How do we actually get to the next level where we actually validate that the people using those assets are the right people, and they should always be using those assets and those assets only to do the work they're supposed to do, right? I don't know Robert, but Robert's maybe somebody that's actually helping me out on the weekend, and he's an admin. But should he be connecting to an Exchange server at midnight on a Saturday night? If he is, I might want to challenge that, right? I'm paying him for doing this 9 to 5 during the week. So why is he doing this on the evenings? Well, that might be a crisis. It could happen, but I need to be able to see that. Like, is he the right guy doing this at the right time for the right reasons? Or is he a guy that gone rogue? Or maybe he actually lost his account, or somebody was able to impersonate his account and do something he's not supposed to do, We need to be able to see this. So what we're hoping is raise awareness of the people doing what they're doing are the right people, and not a hacker that's impersonating an account that he was able to abuse, right? That's where we're trying to go. So we released a few months ago a global threat report where we were talking about, what's important. Of course, identities, endpoints, the machine themselves, the workloads, and data. Right? So we're doing pretty good. I think people are getting there, and if you're not there yet, that's definitely something you need to do sooner than later. I think people are doing good on the code execution side. People are doing well on protecting the machine itself, protecting the endpoint, and looking at what's going on in that machine. So there are traditional security solutions that got replaced by the next thing. I think that's fine. I think we're doing well there. I could be wrong, right? So, and feel free to come and see me at the booth and say, no, you're wrong. We're just starting steps. And I got to say, maybe the US is a bit further ahead than Canada is, but that's what I'm seeing, right? We're getting there from an endpoint and workload perspective where these machines are usually pretty well protected. But are we looking at the identity is hard to manage, and are we protecting that data, that critical data that needs to stay where it's supposed to be? So that report is free. You don't have to pay for it. It's interesting because this is done by the Overwatch team, our threat hunting team. We have a pro threat hunting team, and they do this full time. So it's something we release every quarter, and we actually talk about what we see in the field, right? So it's a worldwide team, right? We cover the globe, and we have people looking at this nonstop. So we'll tell you, right, in the last 3 months, here's what we're seeing from these countries, from these groups of hackers. We call them adversaries, and this is what's going on right now. And this could be a trend that we see in a different country that might be coming to Canada for healthcare, or that might be coming to Canada for retail. We have that information. We actually release this publicly. It's not something we charge for. It's a free report. But we see more and more, like Patrick was saying, we see more and more hackers actually using living off the land, built-in tools. So built-in tools, if using traditional solutions, those tools are not something that will raise a detection, right? Or that will trigger something. If it's a tool that's built into the OS, that's used by valid credentials, in a lot of cases, it'll go quiet, right? Nobody will see it, or at least it won't raise a detection. So we need to find ways to be able to, without blocking the people that still not legally, but that still need to use it, we need to be able to block the bad people from using it, if that makes sense, right? So that percentage is actually increasing. We are seeing a trend where we're doing, we call them malware-less attacks, right? It's getting more and more. Because the hackers are evolving, we need to evolve as well, right? They're getting better at using tools that are built in the system. We need to be better at actually blocking them for using those tools where they're not supposed to. The other one that's good, that also released on our site that's free, you can pull down. Gartner pulled out a report about identity detection and prevention. This is something that's big. This is something that we see increasing. That's why I wanted to talk about this today. It's been increasing since the beginning of the pandemic, but it's actually accelerating over the last couple of months. I guess timing-wise, the bad actors, the adversaries we saw from Eastern Europe started this alongside a few months before the Ukraine invasion, right? So January, February timeframe, and it is increasing now. Canada is sort of lucky because we're a smaller target, but that's not gonna stop the bad people, right? If these things are interesting to them, that might be some monetization they can do, they'll come after us. They'll come after the organization in Canada, right? So we're not in a fight yet. They're focused more on the Eastern European countries, but that's, nothing is stopping them for just opening up a door if that door is open and just going through. And we need to be able to make sure that we can see and manage and protect those identities, right? It is key to the enterprise. It is key to what you are allowed to do. So when you log into your system, you're using an identity, right? Everybody needs an identity to log into a corporate system. So is that identity always monitored? When I log in, sure. I'll have a Windows event log, or I'll have a Mac, I'll have Linux, whatever I'm using, Red Hat, whatever that is. I track that information. I know what's going on with my identity. But how are you checking if, Jody, who works with me, or Patrick, if those people tomorrow morning are pissed at the company and they want to say, you know what, I'm going to grab everything and I'm going to go, right? Are we actually able to monitor this? Are we able to say, he's doing something, his behavior is not normal. He's supposed to do this during the week. We have a defined role. We know what he's doing or she's doing. and they're not doing what they're supposed to do. So what's going on? And can we actually see it, or are we completely blind because they have valid credentials? Right? That's pretty critical. So those keys are being stolen from the company. Right? They'll be stolen, and there'll be something as simple as what Patrick mentioned through a phishing email, not even spear phishing, or it'll be a brute force password spraying. Right? We're talking about Mimikatz and doing LSAS dumping. Those rainbow tables hashes, those rainbow tables dictionaries, they're sold on the dark web, and they're constantly being updated. There's actually a really big market to actually get those databases, right? They used to be sold, and it's funny because I'm going to show my age now, but France was a big market for this about 10 years ago. We're actually selling the rainbow hashes of all the Windows potential passwords on CDs. You could actually mail order the CDs, and it would get there. It was really efficient. You would get it in like 2 days. And then you would actually do brute force hacking against those CDs. Those groups got caught, but it was just funny. Like that hasn't stopped, right? The hackers are just more they're well organized, they're more organized, and they will actually sell you those on the dark web. So we got to be careful. Those brute force password spraying, when you got offline LSAS, you got those credential dumps, you can get to those, right? So we need to be able to protect those. So when we focus on when we actually look at we zoom in on the first couple of steps on the cyber kill chain, we see that in a lot of cases, the first steps, when you're getting those initial access and you're getting that execution, they're using valid accounts, right? You see, sorry about the colors, but you see a lot of those steps, they're using valid accounts. They're using accounts that will bypass normal EDR and the AV solutions because they're not triggering anything. We got to be careful about that, right? And when we look at the global threat report that we release, we're seeing that, at least from a CrowdStrike perspective with our customer, we're seeing that there's over 80% of those attacks that are starting with identity theft, right? Or identity compromise, whether it be, again, phishing email, password spraying, or just dumping LSAS. However that hacker is actually getting their hands on those passwords, they're not starting at the initial access. They're starting way down the cyber kill chain. So it's going up, and it's not stopping, and it's not slowing down. And from an increased perspective, one of the other things we see is a lot more companies have unmanaged hosts, whether that be a legacy system that for some reason needs to stay in the enterprise, like we're talking about medical imaging is really a big one. Whether we're talking contractors that are coming in and not actually, you're letting them come in because they need to do work for you, but you're not putting all the stuff the security tools that you should put on those machines because they're not part of your domains. Or depending what it is, you have a temp worker who's coming in with his own machine, that's a weak spot, right? A legacy host. And then you get valid credentials. And from that, they can do lateral movement and compromise even a managed host. We see more and more of that. In the last 12 months, our threat hunting team has seen an increase of almost 300% of abuse of valid credentials. The hackers are evolving. We need to evolve as well. We need to be able to block them. We need to find new ways to make sure that they don't do the bad stuff that they want to do. Does that make sense? Yes, it's still early. I get it. Is this something that you're able to do, like just by raising hands? Like, is this something that you are thinking about today? Have you started to look at how will I control valid identities within my environment? A few hands. There you go. It is something we need to do. It is something that everybody, from a community standpoint, we need to be able to look at. And kudos if you have projects. Kudos if you're already doing it, because it's. I think for Canada, we're not far enough in that sector, and we need to do more from that standpoint. Right? When you talk about the identity and the threat actors, right? Their objective is abusing. They want to do broad access. They want to do broad execution. And they want to monetize somehow. Monetization for e-crime actors, again, ransomware, money, some sort of extortion. Monetization for state-sponsored, China, Russia, Korea. They want to get some IP. They want to get some credibility. They want to get services down, right? So they want to go wide and go big. So when they get into a system, they'll look around. The hacker gets on a system, he's going to look around. He's going to stay quiet. He's going to try not to disturb anything. He's going to try not to launch tools that will actually trigger detections. So he's going to find out, who is he? What does he have access to? Where's he trying to go? And in a lot of cases, you're opening up a command prompt, you're doing an ARP request, You're looking at stuff that you have access to. Oh, okay, I got these domain controllers I got access to. I got these critical infrastructure server I can get to. And then he's inside. He doesn't have access yet, but he's able to run those, again, living off the land tools without triggering anything big. That's what he's looking for, right? So when we talk about the cyber kill chain and going back to Patrick's example, right, that initial access and they're doing the discovery, I guess we're usually pretty good at that. But what if the bad person is actually starting at the lateral movement stage? He basically bypassed everything you had put in place from a code execution standpoint. Everything you had, the solutions you put in place to protect yourself, he's bypassed all of that, and he's just starting at the lateral movement stage. So if, from his timelines, what I remember was between the time that the actual patient 0 was infected and that lateral movement, it was about 2 months, just under 2 months. 2 months is a long time for a bad person to be in a system, not raising any flags, but gathering intel. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to have that person there for so long, right? Even a few minutes is critical. So when you're talking about 2 months, and funny enough, what we've seen, and going back to the Frost and Sullivan company, what they've seen in the last 12 months is that the average is actually 250 days of a system, someone being in a system and actually doing full resolution and getting back to green, right? 250 days. It's almost a year before they're actually able to get back to normal. We need to shorten that window. And how do we do that? Like, we need to be able to protect, again, the valid identities from being abused. So going back to my little separation, right? The first part is execution. Stuff like Mimikatz or doing anything of credential dumping, doing LSAS dump. We're able, when the tool is executed itself, all the traditional solutions on the market will be able to catch that. But if they're not using that because they don't need to, because they have good identities, then we need to have a solution to cover the last mile, which is hurting the most, right? When he's going from a laptop to an Exchange server, or going from a laptop to a DC. That's the part we need to be able to block. But first, we got to be able to see it. And a lot of places, people can't see it. They're blind to it. They don't know what's going on. We need to be able to see that part and protect it. I already covered that. So how's the health of your identity store, right? And you don't have to answer this because I know sometimes it's a bit uncomfortable to actually raise your hand for this, but let me ask you this. How many privileged accounts do you have in your organization? If I ask you tomorrow morning, can you tell me how many privileged accounts you have within your whole organization? Are you able to say, or it's going to take, a day, a week, a month to actually be sure that you have all the answers to that? How long will it take? Can you know at any given point? Why is that? Was there a question, sorry? Nope. So how are these privileged accounts being used? Active Directory is awesome. It's been around forever. I got to say, because it's been around forever, in a lot of cases, there's a lot of crap in there, right? And a lot of people don't have activities, projects, people actually cleaning up and looking at this day in, day out. Nobody has the cycles to do this. I could be wrong, right? And so if people have time to do this, you are awesome. It's really, really rare that people will actually go back in on a regular basis, look at what actually is in there, and say, okay, I need to clean this up. I got 21 privileged accounts that are jointly embedded in 3 different distribution groups that maybe they shouldn't be embedded into, right? It's not something that's easy to do, but we have to do it. That's how hackers are getting in. They're taking advantage of these access and the fact that it's been around forever, nobody's cleaning it up, let me take advantage of it. I'm sure I'll reach, at some point, an account that was going to have enough privilege to get me to that domain controller. Identify service accounts. Again, the same questions, right? Do you know how many service accounts you have in the enterprise? Identify stale accounts. What's your policy when somebody's actually leaving the organization? What's the policy when an account is not being used for months? What are you doing with this, right? Is that account going dormant or is it still accessible? If it's an admin, do you have a different policy for it, right? So that's something we need to know. It's something that you need to make sure you have in place. And if you do, kudos to you. A lot of people today don't have that, don't have that hygiene on the Active Directory side. Of course, assess the risks. That's what I talked about, memberships, groups, having access to groups, It's not the direct access that's going to hurt you. It's the embedded access. It's the ones that you don't look at because it's, okay, he's part of that group. I'm good with that. And then you find out, oh shoot, that group has Exchange access, a SQL Server access, system access. Oh, I didn't know that, right? Because somebody made that change 2 years ago, and that person left, and nobody cleaned up that group membership. That never happens, right? And then, at the end, of course, if you have multiple domains, if you're a big organization and you have multiple stores, and they're actually, talking to each other, are there any crossovers, right? Are you stitching those identities? Are there permissions that are going across those boundaries that might be impacting you, right? Nothing worse than being infected by somebody you're actually doing business with, or you have a domain join with, when that you're doing your job, but they're not doing theirs. So you're gonna fall victim through, something that's permeable and that you're able to get compromised from someone else, right? So state-sponsored. Why I bring this up? Patrick mentioned it through Conti, right? But we're seeing this in the wild today. State sponsor is usually going to be some sort of group or hacking. We call them adversaries that are going to be partially or entirely funded by the country itself, and they're going to have really established a place where they need that information, but they don't need it quickly, right? China is famous for getting to places and staying in there for months. Super disciplined, low and steady, not raising any flags, but getting to where they need to go. And it'll take a long time before you actually know they're there if you're not putting the right policies and the right solutions in place. Right? That's the main difference. Monetization usually is going to be quicker. They're going to go in, they're going to make a loud bang, they're going to compromise you, or they're going to say, I want this amount of Bitcoins to give you the decryption key. But the nation state, a lot of cases, they're going to go a lot more a steady, slower pace, but they're going to be in your environment for a long time. And that's even, I think, for us at least, it's just scarier. We don't want them in there. We don't want them to stay there for a long period of time. We want to make sure and we're able to see where they are, what they're doing. Right? So again, going back to my code execution and identity access, the middle part is the impact, right? For the state-sponsored, the people that are state-sponsored, the hacking groups that are state-sponsored, is when they're in there and they have access to a single system, it's almost all the time where they won't raise any trigger until they reach a critical infrastructure server, something that's going to be important to you. And that's where we're able, that lateral movement piece, that's where we need to be able to see it, right? So that's usually not going to be, big organizations are going to have a lot of those servers, but it's usually not going to be as hard to do as monitoring at the same level of scrutiny all the systems, right? So if you have an organization of 5,000 employees, you might have 300 servers. So I think it should be easier to look at usage of privileged access on those 300 servers than looking at privileged access on all the machines all the time. If that makes any sense, right? So you'll have basic policies on the EDR side, on the Next-Gen AV side, and you're going to protect those machines from code execution. But when you're talking about lateral movement and where the bad people are trying to go, you want to be able to protect that lateral movement. So whether it be an RDP connection, SMB access, launching a SQL debugging tool, right? You need to be able to see that the account doing this is the right account. We're still seeing today's service account. We're still seeing today's service account that have interactive login, which makes no sense to me, but still the case today. We're still seeing account today that can actually trigger applications on systems that they're not even supposed to have access to, right? So nothing worse than a SQL or Oracle admin coming to see a security guy saying, hey, I need domain admin credentials. Why? Well, it's a SQL server. It's my server. Give me domain admin credentials. Why? Because I need it. And if you don't give it to me, I'll go to your boss, right? That never happens, right? So giving too much permissions too fast, it's still a thing, right? And we need to push back. I know it's hard. I know you have the hardest job when you need to do that, but we need to do it, least privileged access, and monitor those critical infrastructure server from those privileged access use. Another good one that I wanted to bring up, and this is something that was observed in the wild pretty recently. It was, I'm not going to name the hacking group, but it's a very well-known hacking group where they were able to convince the organization in an Eastern European country to divulge their credentials through a valid Office portal, right? Does it reach your antivirus and EDR solution then? It doesn't. It's a public portal. That person just got lured into entering their credentials. They thought it was going to a real Office 365 portal. Guess what? They were not. So without even reaching the front door, that hacker has valid credentials. That person, I guess we got sort of lucky. That person, can you actually see anything here, or is it too small? That's pretty good. Okay, I can't see anything here. That person was actually able to get into the system and then run a DC sync on the system itself. He was stopped. We got lucky, and that person was stopped. But it was not only an execution issue; it was also an identity where they were trying to run some tools to actually compromise the domain controllers. Right. Now I want to talk about NOPAC. So anybody here had to deal with NOPAC in November last year? Nobody? I guess you all got lucky and you patched as soon as Microsoft said you needed to patch. So NOPAC was released in November last year, right? And if you haven't, I guess the counterpoint to this is if you haven't looked at the CVEs yet, maybe you should look, because if it's not patched, you are definitely in a high risk situation right now, right? NOPAC was basically and why was this actually critical was when NOPAC was released, it was a responsible disclosure, right? So the researcher group and the people actually built the tool, disclosed it to Microsoft, but the turnaround time for Microsoft to actually do something, build a patch, was super short. I can't remember, but we're talking days, we're not talking months, right? Usually security researchers, good people actually find holes in vulnerabilities and actually solutions. When they do responsible disclosure, they'll give companies ultimatum, right? They'll say, you got 30 days to do it. And then they release, right? They won't wait for you. But at least they give you time. In a lot of cases, though, the gray hat, they'll give you a really short period of time, right? 1 day, 2 days, 48 hours, not more than that. And that's where the companies need to turn around faster and release those patches, right? So for NOPAC, basically it was from an initial access to actually getting the compromise was super quick. We're talking seconds, right? So the way it worked in a high level was there was a vulnerability in the SAM account name and the domain controller impersonation where a hacker built a tool to say, I'm able to create a computer account, and then I'm going to rename the computer account to the name of my domain controller and just remove the trailing S, right? So the account itself. And then what happens is he's able to actually reach out to the Kerberos TGT and get a ticket as a domain controller. And that's all with just limited domain user accounts. He's not a system admin yet. And then he actually renamed his machine to his regular name, right? Because he needs an account, a computer name that has the right information with the $ at the end to be able to communicate with the domain. But now he has that TGT, what we call a golden ticket. And he's running another tool and say, it's not my computer name, it's a DC name. And now he's able to obfuscate and be a domain controller, right? 2 tools, they were weaponized super quick, and people were able actually to use it in a matter of seconds. That's pretty impactful. That's super high risk, right? Microsoft did release patches, but we don't know how much time actually between the time that the patches were released, actually between the time of the disclosure to Microsoft, how long it was for the weaponization itself. The tools, I think his name was Charlie Clark, something like that, Charlie something. The tool was released super quick after the patches. That's the dangerous part, because then you got people all over saying, hey, let me try this. And you use it in Cali, it works like this. I'm not an expert by any means, right? It's been at least 10 years I've done some really good pen testing. I was able to use the tool. So even if a manager is able to use the tools, a lot of script kiddies are able to use the tool, right? And that's the danger. People that don't know what they're doing can actually cause more harm because they don't know what's going on and they don't know what they're doing, right? So what should have been done? What approach have we taken instead, right? So when the name change happened, it's not normal. We can actually look for it. There was a guy from Splunk that released a really good Splunk query that if you have Splunk, a really good query to say, look at all my events through all my environments to see if I have an account name change. And if that account name change has removed the $sign, should never happen, right? When you're doing this in one step. And then if you do this, then you're able to report it to the EDR tool, and the EDR tool is able to alert you. And that's the goal. We want to see that change. That's suspicious behavior. On its own, it might be okay. I don't see a valid reason why, but there might be a reason. You know, a blue team exercise, tabletop, somebody actually doing this for the right reason. There might be a reason. But, you know, in 99% of the cases, there shouldn't be a reason to do this. We need to be able to catch it. you need the tools to be able to see those suspicious behavior and block it. Does that make sense? And then the famous Log4j. Maybe I didn't see any hand raised for NOPAC, but have you guys had to deal with Log4j? Oh, thank you. I was kind of starting to sweat a bit, right? Log4j was another one, right? They were dropping a shell on a system. They could stay there for a while, right? They were not getting detected. And it took a while for people to actually see, am I affected? Do I even know all the Log4j places, all the middleware I have that potentially have that vulnerable system? They don't know. They didn't have any tools to actually even investigate. They didn't have any tools to look at all the components within their environment and say, I might have something. I don't know. It might be. I can't reach it. So the bad people that were leveraging Log4j and the whole Sunburst fiasco and all that, they were able to get in there and stay in there for a long time before being detected. So if we're talking, command and control, the first part, we're talking about the average that we saw, that the customers that were working with us and we were helping out, it was about a day. It was about 24 hours. But between the time they actually dropped the shell and were able to exploit that code, do that lateral movement, and get compromised, it's still seconds, right? So that's pretty quick. That's why we want to be able to block. So where do we block it? Well, we would have blocked it, at the middle, right? When the adversary uses those credentials, right? So it was a system account using system privilege accounts, doing something they're not supposed to do. It's not easy to actually detect, but you have to be able to detect it. It's an application on a system that's doing something it's not supposed to do with accounts it's not supposed to do, to be doing that. We need to be able to detect that. And that's, again, the next level. Are the entities being used that are valid, are doing what they're supposed to do, are doing something that's suspicious, or at least need further investigation? We need to be able to block that. And if you would have something that would actually be looking at identities, you would have been able to block that RDP connection, I guess, to the domain controller or whatever that critical infrastructure server was. I got a couple more. Those are actually super recent. So so at CrowdStrike, we name the bad actors, the threat actors that we actually tracked. And I guess I want to open a small parenthesis. We received, I guess, a lot of Twitter hate at Black Hat and at DEF CON this summer because people were saying that we idolize them. That's not the case at all. We want to name them because we wanted them for our customers to understand who they are. It's a lot easier for a customer to understand, okay, I got an adversary group, a hacking group that's coming from Russia and that's targeting healthcare, then I'm going to say to him, well, he's using 24/27/8 and they're targeting, X amount of systems. When we put a face to the bad guy, it helps. It helps our customers. That's the whole point of why we do adversaries, the whole point we name them. And you actually, if you want to look at it, it's free. We got it on our site. It's called adversary.crowdstrike.com. You can look at it. You don't have to agree, and I'm super open to comment if it looks bad, but the whole goal is to be able to name those people. Show to our customers where they're coming from and who they're targeting, right? So we got good graphic artists. Personally, I'm a nerd. I like it. Some people don't, but it's cool to see. You see a bear, you see it's Russia. You see a panda, it's China. It's easy to remember. You see a lot of people don't know this, but you see a Kalima. A Kalima is actually the fictive animal from Korea, right? It's sort of like a unicorn that has I don't know, some sort of stuff. It's weird, but anyway, it's supposed to make sense, right? So for this group, for this hacking group, right? The group is called actually Gothic Panda. I had to anonymize it, but the group itself is called Gothic Panda, and we've seen the last couple of months them actually going after targeted attacks in environments where they're going to run living off the land tools and look at credentials, right? I gave you a couple examples. Actually, this is our Overwatch team. This is live stuff. This is customer that we work with and we help that said, hey, they were using regular tools, but you see here's a couple of cats that were run. I can't even see myself what's written there, but basically there was some proc dump. Proc dump is a sysinternal tools. So they were able to add credentials there, or even just trying to save the LSAS itself offline and then trying to do some brute force hacking. This is happening now. This is not something that's from 2 years ago. We see this more and more, right? And this is against customers that are in North America, right? I'm not going to say the customers, but it's close to us. It's as I want to say, right? So these bad people that we're targeting more Eastern European now are really targeting the nation state, are targeting North America, and we want to be able to stop them because they're focused 80% plus focus on identity. The other one was so the spiders for us are e-crimes, so people that go after it for money, right? So ransomware or obfuscation of getting some sort of dollars for it, right? And the examples I show here, which I can't even read myself, but I think it's like a few dumps from an LSAS memory and trying to get to it. And then, I can see it here. There you go. The second one was a PowerShell. We're actually using a debugging tool. So SQL Dumper is installed with the SQL Diagnostic suite from Microsoft. It's free. So a lot of SQL developers actually use this, and they put it on systems. And in some cases, which they should never do, they will actually use and install those debugging tools on a SQL server itself, right? If you see this, or if you haven't done this in the past, shame on you. Don't tell me. I don't want to know. But don't let debugging tools be installed in production systems, right? They're there for a reason, and they should be remote access security in the right manner. But these tools were used on a SQL server, and they were able to go a bit too far, a bit further than expected. So use cases I guess sort of wrapping up, use cases I want us to keep in mind when we're talking about validating identities and what you need to think about, right? Of course, everybody's going to say it. You need to secure Active Directory. Yeah, it's easy to say, not easy to do if it's been there for more than a year, I guess, right? But we still need to do it to do it. If you're working with an outside firm, if you've never done it, get some tabletop exercise going, right? You have, I think you have a couple companies here that can do it. You can work with us as well. Get some tabletop. You did some red team, blue team exercise. Start with the easy stuff. Get with if you've never done it and you don't want to fall off your chair, start with more of a collaboration approach where the company is going to come in and work with you and maybe show you ways that way you can protect yourself. But if you think you're ready, go for the big one. Go for the red team exercise. It's an eye opener, right? And we have, we work with a lot of banks and they do this every quarter. Kudos to them, right? And I understand it's something that's going to cost money. It's not easy to do. So I'm not asking you to do it every quarter, but doing those exercises will raise your security awareness and will give you a better approach to equip yourself to stop the bad guys from doing it, right? Cyber insurance. We're starting to see cyber insurer ask for this when you actually sign up with them. I think we're sort of lucky in Canada that it's not required everywhere, but if you're working with a cyber insurance firm in the US, they're actually starting to put it on the paper itself. You need to do every half a pen test. You need to show me the result. You need to do an audit every quarter. You need to show me the results when you sign up with them. So maybe it hasn't reached us yet, but it's coming. And I see this as being even more important in 2023. Legacy system, of course, they're still around. I guess they're a really huge weak point. We want to be able to protect them. If you're still running Windows 98, please get rid of it. Even people, and we saw it with the Ireland hack, right? A lot of Windows 7 systems still around. That's a system that's over 15 years old, right? So it's it's time to move on. It's hard, and especially if it's actually like Patrick was saying, with applications are dedicated to imaging, to the medical environment, the manufacturer needs to certify it on a new platform, which takes years, right? Even I'm working with a company right now that has a CATIA system, and they're on Windows 7, and they're swearing that it can't be migrated. And then we find out from another customer in the US, they migrated three months ago, and they got certification for it, right? So sometimes it's the vendor, and you got to push back. Right? I'm not saying it's that the case all the time, but I would, the Canadian way, friendly challenge the vendor to say, can we migrate that machine? And if not, why not? And have you had any success, or have you had any customers somewhere else that actually did it? Right? We gotta accelerate that because it's hurting us pretty bad. If you're not using MFA today, definitely strongly recommend to use that MFA solutions. It's again, when you're talking about managing identities and zero trust, it's always looking at what do you have access to, and then I challenge you. I don't necessarily block you. from being able to access that resource, because I don't want to stop your work, but I want to challenge you. Again, I'm going to pick on Patrick, right? If Patrick is working 9 to 5 during the week, there's no reason for him to be in an Exchange server on the weekend after midnight. There's no reason for that. So if it's a crisis and he's an Exchange admin, I won't block him because I'm going to have to wake up and pick up the phone myself. But I want to challenge him. That's where MFA comes in. We need to have system in place, if you have MFA already, that you can look at and say, okay, these critical infrastructure servers, when somebody's doing something they're not supposed to do, whatever that policy is, you need to be able to challenge it. You can block it if you want, but if you don't want to stop work because it's a valid purpose, at least challenge it. That's where MFA comes in. And if you haven't educated yourself on golden tickets and pass the hash, please do. This is something that's actually going to be increasing over the next months. We see it as a big risk. And if you can't look at your AD, if you're not sure what to look at, come see us. Come see any of the other vendors on the other side. We need to be better protected for this. I'll leave you with this. This comes from Gartner. Modern attacks requires continuous validation of identities, right? See it the path, get some real-time response, and have some risk-based to be able to manage that. And I think I did a few. I caught you a couple of minutes back, but I got time for a few more questions or any questions. Any questions out there? Wow. Should I have done this in French instead? Yes. That's a great question. And if we think that Mac is not a target, that's absolutely false. We see more and more attacks being actually done on the Mac side, and even on because Apple has the same issues that Windows has. There's a lot of Catalina still out there, unpatched, that are there for a while, that Apple hasn't supported for over a year, and it's still out there. And it is a target. It is. We see it. We actually had to intervene with one of our big customers in the province, not here in Ontario, recently, about a Mac attack, because a lot of cases, it's higher exec people or directors and above that want that little nice shiny toy, and they're using it. Well, guess what? They're not patching it, right? And they will actually block some of those policies. So yes, we see it, and if you think that Mac is not a threat or a target, you are 100% wrong. And same thing for Linux. Even worse for Linux, I guess, because of all the kernels versions and all that. Good question, thank you. And see, Patrick gave you a pair of socks. They're cool socks. Any other questions? I guess what I'd like to suggest, and I'm not being paid by. Okay, sorry. The question was, what if you have legacy systems, and that company that actually built a system for you that's purpose-built for a specific application is bankrupt, defunct, and no longer exists? What do? Do you just bite the bullet? I would have to say, before you do that, I would look at, and I'm not being paid by VMware or Citrix, but I would look at virtualizing that machine and filtering traffic in and out and putting it into a secure data center. That's what I've been working with customers in the past before I joined CrowdStrike. It's like, if you're stuck, you got to keep it. Find a different way to actually make this available. You can even you put it into a dirty network or a separate network, and then you have a jump box to access that machine. So you mitigate your risk. You find a way to leave that machine available to your environment, but in a much secure manner. Don't just leave it on the desk of your secretary or next to a copier machine, right? That's the wrong thing to do. So find a different approach to it. Good question, thank you. Got time for one more? Yes, sir.
Some MFA solutions seem to only check the MFA when you're registering a new device, logging in, and then it's trusted maybe for 30 days or maybe forever. Is that a bad idea? Should that be avoided in favor of daily or more often checking of the?
So we went the other route. Every single authentication you do, should be challenged, right? Yes, 100% correct. Like if you're talking about application portals like Okta or even VMware, VMware has Workspace ONE, it'll be an authentication and then you're gonna have a session cookie for your browser. It'll be good for X amount of minutes. I would say if you're able to look at the next level, solutions where you are actually challenging at every single authentication, that's how you eliminate the risk completely. That's where we're trying to go. There might be some in-between solutions, but getting an authorization for a device, for a window, it's how you manage your risk for how long that window is. Yeah, good question. Thank you. I think that's it for me. Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience.